Oh, yeah, thanks, Ann. We're really excited to kick this off with one of our earliest supplier partners, Rhinomed. So I'm joined by Ivan Balcarce. Ivan and I have been working together at US ENT for probably close to 4 years, we calculated. And then more recently, Marnie Kerbo, who I knew from another role in another life, joined Rhinomed too. And so those are the two folks that will be presenting over the next 15 or 20 minutes, the broad technology that Rhinomed brings to the USENT portfolio. Most of you know my team members, Greg and Julia, so uh, we won't need to go through all that song and dance again. So when we start these supplier spotlights, I like to explain why we partnered with this particular company. And I've always been fascinated with, again, the breadth of technology that Rhinomed has. Rhinomed is based in Melbourne, Australia. Ivan and I met, though, at an American Rhinologic Society meeting years ago. And I was looking at the products that they have for sleep, for snoring, but also for sports performance. And those were really fascinating. We're familiar with various technologies that dilate the nostrils to allow those of us that are exercising to get more nasal airflow. Obviously, that same phenomenon helps in many cases during sleep to improve nasal airflow, to reduce snoring, but more importantly, in many cases, to reduce the propensity for sleep apnea. So that's what really intrigued me. And as Ivan and Marnie will detail, they pivoted during COVID and have a whole new suite of technologies in the diagnostics area, which is so important in our routine day-to-day practice of ENT. And so with that, Ivan and Marnie, please take it away. And I'll ask questions, and I also welcome questions. Just I think there's a raise your hand function if you want to do that. You can type something in the chat window, and Julia and I will relay that to our guests. Um, as these always are, this is very informal, and we'll try to stay right on time and reserve 8 to 10 minutes at the end for questions around 12:20 Central, 1:20 Eastern. So with that, guys, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Matheny, for having us on this spotlight. We really do appreciate our partnership with USENT. And as you mentioned, well, Rhinomed is a nasal airway technology company. And so for the last 9 years or so, we've been dedicated to designing products to help patients breathe, or help people, consumers, people, humans, breathe better through their nose. And I'm not going to pretend to sit here and talk to a bunch of ENTs and instruct them on the importance of nasal breathing. But one of the things that we did as a company was we realized that, well, okay, though you should breathe through your nose all the time, um, not being able to do so presents a bigger problem for people when they're sleeping. So we became sort of our mission. We became a sleep company, a company to help people get better sleep by reducing, mouth breathing and snoring. So to that end, what we did about a year ago was we commissioned a global sleep and snoring report, what we call our first annual sleep and snoring report, soon to be followed up by one that's going to be launching, shortly, our second one. And we had a lot of good learnings. We actually had a really good sample size. We surveyed 2,000 people in the US, 2,000 in the UK, and 2,000 in Australia. And what we found was some things like, for example, the US probably has the worst sleeping record of those. We in the US sleep an average of 5.8 hours a night. So kind of far from the 7 or 8 that we were hoping to see. But not only is the the quantity lacking, but so is the quality. So 36% of the people surveyed were unhappy with the quality of their sleep. 95% of the people surveyed believe it's important to get better sleep. And 3/4 of those have tried to do something about it. 3/4 of those have either researched something, bought something, tried something to try to get better sleep. We also found that in the US, adults reported that their sleep was disturbed an average of 2.7 nights a week. And 51% of adults admit to snoring, and 50% of adults admit that their partner snores, whether their partner admits it or not. So what we did was so what we have done as a company, and again for the last 8 or 9 years, is to produce these nasal dilators, internal nasal dilators. Such Mute is our flagship product. This is what the pack looks like, right? And basically, they come in packs of 3. And for those of you that haven't seen them, they sort of look like this, and they go in your nose. And what they do is gently push out inside. And I've got one open here just to sort of show what the platform looks like. I think you might be able to see it's 2 horizontal loops or paddles, and they go in your nose, and they help you to breathe better. So you just sort of pop them in, and they're fairly low profile. They don't have a whole lot of plastic coming out of your nose. But 75% of the people who try them say that their snoring has been eliminated, or reduced or eliminated. So it allows you to get 38% more air. And that's what we've been doing to help people breathe better through the nose.
Ivan, how long do those typically last? Like, how many nights can a patient use one of those mute devices?
So the packaging says that each device is good for 10 days, and the idea being that you would replace the pack every month. Now, we understand that they're being used a little longer than that, and it's sort of like a toothbrush situation that your dentist might tell you to change your toothbrush every 4 months, and some people will stay with it until the last bristle is hanging on. So, if they stay with it a little longer, that's fine. Sure, for hygiene purposes, you do kind of want to have a regular cycle of switching them out,
Mm-hmm.
and in the meanwhile, you keep them clean with warm, sudsy water. But if people change them out instead of every 10 days, maybe every 2 weeks, that would be quite fine.
And are these prescription devices that the physician needs to write a prescription, or do the physicians sell them, or where can folks get these?
So they're available over the counter at most fine drugstores and some supermarket drugstores. They're available on Amazon. Physicians can also make them available to their patients. I head up the program that works with clinicians so they get at a discounted rate. And then if they want to, they can go ahead and have the patients buy it from them out of their offices. They retail. So they come in 4 sizes. What I have here is the large, which is the red pack, but they also come in different colors to indicate small, medium, and large. And there's also a trial pack or a variety pack that has a small, a medium, and a large in it. That one retails for $14.95, and then the 3 of the same size will retail for $21.95. And physicians' offices can get them from us for $10 and $14. So the $10 one would retail for
US ENT members where I can get that, and so it's a potential, revenue generator for practices. So
right.
that's great. Okay.
Yeah, that's the price that you can get it from through US ENT. And actually, I wanted to mention because we're aware that ENTs, well, they have more permanent solutions for nasal obstruction, correct? But so how would an ENT use maybe a nasal dilator? And I've had conversations with many that tell me, well, you know what, we use them as a screening tool. Put them in your nose. How do you feel? Can you breathe better? Yes. Well, you know what? That's how good you're going to feel every day after I'm done with my procedure. And you can also send your patient home with it right away. And they have a solution now, and they don't have to wait a couple of weeks. You can start with this, and then eventually we're going to go to what's going to help you to breathe better all the time.
Well, even Ivan, yeah, I've used it. Some of those treatments that we have are radio frequency based, and it takes 2 or 3 months for the effects to really set in to stabilize the nasal cartilage.
Mm-hmm.
So I've used this to temporize the patient while they're healing. So even more than just a glorified coddle maneuver, that's what we do to test and see
Correct.
if patients might benefit from a nasal valve procedure, but while they're going through the healing process of the actual procedure. So this is a very, simple but very effective technology. So Marnie, how in the heck did you end up getting in the PCR testing business when you were dealing with snoring and athletic performance?
Yeah, that's an interesting transition. I think one of the one of the things that everybody has a shared experience with on this call is that since the start of the pandemic, we've all had encounters with COVID testing and sample collection methods. Our CEO actually had a father who was in residential aged care, and he was firsthand aware of what anxiety and discomfort was there in that testing. And so, through that testing process, he thought, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? We know the nose so well. We've got to be able to come up with a better solution than the patients, sneezing, coughing in healthcare workers' faces, being uncomfortable, the anxiety associated with that testing. My first experience with testing was my entire family piling in a car in a long line at the Department of Health. And then visiting, my primary care doc who swabbed me through the window of my car. And then most recently, we've had the opportunity to do self-swabbing and testing in our homes with rapid antigen test kits. But the one thing in common with all those is that they were anything but comfortable, and they often resulted in tears, both mine and my children's, when we tried to swab. I've got a little 5-year-old, and anybody who's had to swab a 5-year-old knows it's like swabbing a wet cat. And so, unfortunately, this is a really common experience. And our CEO, Michael Johnson, figured that there was a way for us to incorporate the technology that we had developed for opening the nasal passage to really understand how we could better achieve a standardized way to collect a sample in a nasal swab. And so that's kind of what he did. He put the full resources of the company behind developing a better swab. And I think that's something that was, as he went out and he found more information about, is this really a problem? Is this just a problem that I'm feeling? Is this just a problem I've experienced with my father? But a poll appearance by a major children's hospital revealed that there were several barriers to their willingness to get their children tested. Almost 3/4 of parents really had concerns about the test being stressful, painful, and uncomfortable for their kids. 30% of parents were likely to stop getting COVID testing for their children because of this. And so, of those children who had been tested, almost 80% had experienced distress associated with COVID testing prior. The reluctance to test, that subsequent noncompliance, it leads to the spread of the illness, advanced illness, and improper treatment.
And many of us, Marnie, have seen as ENT doctors, we've seen the complications of the drive-by shootings as we talk about. It ranges from, like, when I've been in Mexico, for example, the swab barely gets into the nose. So of course it's negative, right? Because they're swabbing the skin. But we have around the country seen CSF leaks, certainly a lot of epistaxis when there's a deviated septum and the tester is still ramming that probe in there. So I know firsthand how much more comfortable these swabs are. Can you describe the design, I guess, what Michael and the company put into that to at least reduce the risk of discomfort, but also at least complications?
Yeah, absolutely. So the design is very much like the 2 loops that you saw on the mute device. A flocked swab is the standard of care for swabbing for respiratory illness. And so we developed a swab that had loops that were flocked. Very ingenious design to be able to increase the surface area of the swab. And so when compared with a combined throat and nose swab, this Rhinomed swab actually gets 1.4 times the diagnostic yield. So very easy to use. There's a little handle here. You can't put it too far in. It fits very nicely into the anterior part of your nose. It's very comfortable. You can see I'm not tearing up. I can talk. The healthcare provider that's sampling can be charting, be discussing with the patient what's going on. It stays in the nose for about 15 seconds, and then it's agitated for 15 seconds, brought out, and then it actually has break points. So the end of the swab actually drops down into your collection tube. The design for children, anybody who's had
Yeah,
little
those
ones
are
that they have.
boring. Let's see the good ones. Those are the
The
boring
adult
ones.
one is pretty basic, but the children's are a great way to distract a child while you're having to have them tested. So this is my 5-year-old daughter's favorite. It's the lips. And so you can put a mirror in front of them, a selfie camera in front of them. Before you know it, they're making faces and then you give it a wiggle and you can break it off into a testing tube. So the break points, again, just break off into the tube, and then put your transport media in there. You do your cap, put that on, invert it, and then you have your dropper here.
And now,
So you just that
are
solution.
you aligned? That's so easy. Are you aligned with any specific testing lab PCR process, or can you really be utilized with whatever a practice is currently using? You know, within USENT, many of our practices use molecular lab partners and do their own in-house PCR testing. Is this compatible with that? Or I guess what limits might you have?
Yeah, that was another thing that the company really wanted to be, was lab agnostic, right? We can be used with PCR testing, with lateral flow and rapid antigen testing. And so we do have partners that have incorporated the Rhino Swab Juniors into their pediatric testing kits. So here's our little mustache there that you can see. And those can be incorporated into kits, or they can be used standalone with a PCR-based machine that's in the lab. Because it is a flocked swab, which is standard of care for respiratory testing across all panels, rapid antigen and PCR testing, you can use this with any of those.
That's fantastic. All right, Ivan, what did we miss on some of the other technologies? I mean, I know there's special technology aerosolizing certain medications into the nose, or at least saline spray. What else does Rhinomed offer that our practices could take advantage of?
Well, so we have right now everything is based on this, right, on a similar architecture or platform. We have, in addition to mute, we have a sports nasal dilator called Turbine, and it's a very similar design, only the materials are a little different. It's a little more rigid. It's meant to stay in place, and the angles are a little different as well, but it's meant to stay in place better when you're running, jumping, biking. And people who use them when they're exercising, people have told me, hey, I've done my best time when I put your Turbine in my nose, because they can get this more air through the nose. We have a product called Pronto that actually has a little similar design, but has a little wick that diffuses essential oils. And that one is going right now through a sort of a redesign or rethink. But the basic idea is that you have it in your nose and you can breathe in essential oils all night long if you wanted to. Originally, our scents were lavender and other things that tea tree, things that are designed to either open up the nose or help you get a better night's sleep, help you to relax. And of course, we have the swab now. But everything right now, because we are a company that have scanned so many noses and know the inside of people's noses better than most, so things are based around that basic design or architecture that's designed to fit well in the nose.
That's fantastic. All right, well, audience, any questions for Marnie or Ivan? I think, again, we have a collection of really business savvy administrators. So they're always looking for opportunities for, of course, better patient care, but certainly ways that could generate some revenue for the practice. Ivan, why don't you run through the pricing again? At least on it may be my internet, but it broke up a little bit when you were talking about the USENT discounts.
Oh, it did. Okay. So through USENT, you can get the mute for $10 for the trial or starter pack, which has 3 different sizes in it, and $14 for the either 3 small, 3 medium, or 3 large. These will in turn retail for $15 or $14.95 and $21.95 respectively, right? And those are the prices on Amazon. As we know, Amazon kind of tends to be the juggernaut that sets prices for everyone. And as soon as you tell your patient, hey, you can pick this up for this price, they're going to search and compare with Amazon. So the 10 can go for 15, and the 15 can go for 21 to $22.
And it's obviously pretty self-explanatory, but what type of training would a practice need to have, or does Rhinomed offer in-person training to, if a practice wanted to start selling this, would they train the staff? How would we handle that?
It's fairly simple. I could work personally with any staff that needed training. We have a simple on our website, a 1 minute, minute and a half video to show patients how to use it, how to insert it. As you can see, there's a sort of flat part and a rounded part. So what I always say is, I don't know if you can see that, is the loops
Yeah.
or the rounded part goes toward the lips. So that's easy, because otherwise people sometimes might try to put it in backwards, and that
Upside down, yeah.
yeah, that's a little discomforting. And then the other thing, and let me see if I can use my tweezers so you don't see my big old fat fingers, is what that differentiates the mute from other internal dilators is that it is adjustable on either side. So I've adjusted this one so that this right side on my right is actually opened a little bit more than the left side. So as you can see, perhaps you can see that.
Yeah, we can see. We can see.
Yeah. It has a ratcheting system, sort of like a tie wrap or a zip tie. So you can click, 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 about 4 clicks open or 4 clicks close. So that works very well because, as we know, people are not perfectly symmetrical. So this way they can adjust it to each nostril.
That's very nice. And I presume it's the same, Marnie, for the testing swabs, right? The loops towards the lips. And then the question I had, if you can comment on it, you know, one of the biggest problems ENT physicians have about COVID testing, as I joked about being in Mexico and barely going into the nostril. I mean, the virus, and I know we're testing for more than COVID here, obviously a million different things, but that virus lives in the nasopharynx. So the swab really needs to go back to the very back of the nostril. So can you comment on the length and the design, and when you talked about having 1.4 times the collection capacity, just describe the length and where it sits, please.
Absolutely. So the adult rhino swab, again, the additional surface area that you have there, that actually helps us to collect a bigger sample, better diagnostic yield. And through all of the testing iterations that came out when the pandemic first started, nasopharyngeal swabs were the standard of care early on for testing respiratory viruses. But as we progress through the different iterations of both PCR and rapid antigen testing, the FDA came out and approved that anterior nasal swabs were sufficient for testing for flu, RSV, COVID, the traditional panel of respiratory viruses. And so that's really where you come in. You spoke about if you're in Mexico and you're getting tested at a hotel to be able to come back through the United States, sometimes they're just really touching the inside of your nostril. The great thing about RhinoSwab is that it really standardizes that process. So no matter if you are a 5-year-old trying to climb up the wall, this is comfortable. You can put it in your nose. You don't have to put it in too very far for these looped swabs to then get a sufficient sample. So standardizing the collection process is really important. If you're going from the hotel in Mexico, or you're going to your CVS, where they actually, I think one of the requirements was to have a tear drop out of your eye, to make sure that they got you swabbed appropriately, right? But with the Rhino Swab and the Rhino Swab Junior, there's a handle, so there's no cross-contamination issues. You slide it in, it goes in just as far as it needs to. And then, you have a standardized time for 30 seconds that it's in the nose. Very easy to follow. It was actually a study out of the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in 2022 was done with about 300 children. And it showed that the combined throat and nose swab and the Rhino Swab actually performed much better, again, for that 1.4 times diagnostic yield of a traditional swab. And then the user experience is much better. In that study, they actually did surveys of not only the parents and the children, but the nurses who were there to administer the swabs. And so the preference for the swab was over 80% for the Rhino Swab. Indicating that, if you're able to deliver a better user experience, you're going to get that compliance of testing up a lot higher.
Yeah, so it's really the best of both worlds. It's a better user experience, but it's a better diagnostic tool, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
When you
Yep.
think about
And
the-
completely agnostic to whatever a practice or a hospital chooses to do, if they have their in-house PCR, if they send it wherever.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I
Okay.
was going to say, when you think about it, one of the things that happens when people swab you is that sometimes they can elicit a sneeze, right? So you're sitting in front of somebody who thinks they're sick, you're putting a swab up their nose, you're only 1.5 feet from them, and you've made them sneeze, right? Now, the great thing about the swab is the swab keeps the healthcare worker a little safer, because this can actually be self-administered,
Yeah.
or even at home self-administered, but you
Yeah.
don't have to be 1.5 feet away from the person who suspects that they have something communicable.
Yes.
Exactly.
And Marnie, did we go through the pricing of the swabs? I don't know if we
Yeah,
have.
so the US ENT discount, the retail of the swabs is about $1.75 a piece, and through US ENT, you're able to get down to 80 cents a swab. So a huge discount for the US ENT partners, and we're willing to, you know, come out and help educate your customers. We've got lots of additional collateral videos, short videos, and data, clinical studies that we'd be happy to share.
Great. And that 80 cents, I think that's fairly commensurate with what we're paying for the regular swabs, but we have so much more diagnostic capability with it and the comfort. So
Yes,
we
sir.
we appreciate the discounts you've extended. All right. Well, hopefully everyone got their Grubhub food and is enjoying that. So we'll give you an extra 2 minutes back in your day. Marnie and Ivan, thank you so much for your partnership and all the information you shared. And attendees and those of you who are watching this at some point in the future on video, please feel free to reach out to your account representatives, Greg or Cam, or certainly Julia or I, when you're ready to place orders for your offices. Have a great Tuesday. And again, Happy New Year, everybody. Talk soon.
Thanks so much for having us.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
Bye, y'all.